All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Sarah Tatro, and I'm going to be moderating our technology-driven webinar today. This is the last webinar in a series that we've been working on all year called Creative Plus that focuses specifically on the intersection between creative design and different areas of practice. Today, we're going to be focusing on front-end development. We have some really great tidbits for you today, so we're really excited to share that with you. You can see if you want to kind of participate in this conversation, we have a hashtag, so please absolutely join us. Just so you can see what our faces look like, because you're only hearing our voices today. As I mentioned, my name is Sarah Tatro, and I am a creative strategist here at Forum One. I also have with me our two great experts, Sean Brackett, who is a front-end development whiz. It's going to be great to hear from him. And Corey Jones, our art director, who's going to be talking a lot about design today. So, before we get started, I wanted to give everybody who doesn't know anything about Forum One just a little bit of background on what we do and who we are. So, we're a global full-service digital agency working only with mission-driven organizations to create stunning designs, smart messaging, and custom technology so that we can help them extend their influence. We're headquartered in Alexandria, Virginia. That's where we are today. And we also have offices in DC, Seattle, and Germany. So what we're doing here specifically today, as I mentioned, is part of our Creative Plus series. So today we're going to be talking through a lot of pieces that have to do with design, but also how you translate those designs to the things that you see on the website. It can be kind of a tough transition at times, so Sean and Corey are going to be talking through what that means, how we approach that here at Forum One. And if you guys have questions, please type those into the box. We will have a little bit of time to talk through those at the end and hear directly from Sean and Corey. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean and Corey to go ahead and get us started.
All right, thank you, Sarah. For those of you who have been listening on in the past webinars, you'll be familiar with my voice and also as me as hosting some of the workshops that we do around the area. So again, my name is Corey Jones. I am a art director, senior designer here at Forum One. As you can see, here I am, also a magician. So my role here at Forum One is in brand development and web design, and really it boils down to helping clients realize that their brand potential in the digital space. So my secret weapons of choice, other than magic, of course, is Photoshop, Illustrator, and I also like to use a tool InVision for prototyping. How about you, Sean?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sean Brackett, and I am a senior front-end developer here at Forum One. I deal with the parts of the web that users see and interact with. So my main focus is translating designs into markup that users can experience on a variety of devices. My tools of the trade are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
All right. So although we're supposed to be a part of this team, I feel like the relationship between designer and developer it's sort of strained at times, and sometimes it feels like this epic battle of wills, and it really comes down to just lack of communication and poor processes. That's really what fuels these epic battles between designers and developers. So today we're going to share a few tips and tricks to get your superhero designer and developer on the same page. But before we get into that, let's talk about some common misconceptions between developers and designers, and how they sort of feel about each other. All right, so some of you may be familiar. You pass your design to a developer, and you ask them, hey, what do you think? And they say, I think I have some concerns here. And then you kind of like go down, like, what's wrong? And it's like everything. It's like sometimes we get the sense as designers that these developers are sort of soulless dream killers, like killing all of our ideas. But we'll find out it's really not that true. I mean, I come from a background where it's pretty much hand off. You come up with a design, you hand it off to the developer, and so naturally tensions sort of come at the implementation side. But I would love to hear what you think about us designers, Sean.
So, from my point of view, in my bat cave where I'm coding away all night, I get these designs from a designer, and they defy all the natural laws of physics. These designs exist in a world where everything can be fixed in a couple of keystrokes. Time is endless, and browsers have no actual rules. So I'm forced to now deliver some magical unicorn-like experience that's supposed to work in everybody's browser, on a phone, on a phablet, a tablet, a desktop. Oh, and by the way, we used all of your time and budget in discovery, and so you now have to do this in a week.
It's okay, Sean. Isn't that normal? I mean, I feel like as designers, we're always asked to perform magical tasks. So why shouldn't you? Actually, I don't agree with that. I mean, it's really a thing of the past. So we talked about a few differences. Yeah, we have our differences, and we're not always going to agree on everything. But really, at the end of the day, we're both concerned with quality. We both really want to make cool web experiences, and other than performing magic, we want to create great, the most enriching user experience. So let's talk about building a great experience. So we're going to talk a little bit about workflows here. So in order to build a great experience, let's start with a typical workflow, what we're calling here as the sort of old workflow. So a lot of the issues that come between design and front ends can be traced back to problems with internal process. There's flaws in sort of this concept, this idea of design, develop, deliver to get to this sort of final product. I mean, it reinforces divisions by creating compartmentalized groups that throw work over the wall to one another. And really, we don't work in this vacuum assembly line way. So some flaws with this sort of process are that it's a linear process. It builds false expectations for the client. It can place unrealistic burdens on your dev time, and it often leaves the designer feeling very disgruntled about their designs that they're not realized. But we have another way. There's a better way.
So here at Forum One, we really think that to create a great design experience is really about creating a great user experience, and that comes from meshing like superb visuals with a deep understanding of user workflow. And to get there, that takes continuous iteration. So we believe in this concept of design, prototype, review. And we do that over and over and over again, wash, rinse, repeat, until we get it right. Now, this process fosters collaboration between your UX, your design, and your dev teams. You end up sharing ideas as opposed to just sort of throwing work over a wall at each other. And so today we want to talk about how we do this at Forum One and give you some key tips and tricks for implementing this process in your teams.
All right, thank you, Sean. The first one on that list is mobile. As you can see from this photo, the amount of devices coming out every day it's not going to stop. It's going to keep growing. So you always want to think mobile first, and you want to think beyond this idea that it'll just stack. Responsive design is really hard. So having a mobile strategy is ideal. And if not, just plan for how your designs will respond in different viewports. It is the most common solution to sort of just think that things will stack, but that really depends on the user interface and design. So this is not always an option. What you want to do is you want to sort of consult with your Fed and discuss potential options. You really want to lean on their expert knowledge here of browser technology and sort of craft a solution that's best for the content and the user. So the short here is responsive design is hard, but good solutions require collaboration, planning, and testing, which brings us to our next point.
Testing, prototyping. Whatever you can do, like the idea is to get designs in the browser as early as possible. Going from a comp to a full web build is not easy. It's not always straightforward. Things come up. But prototypes help to take some of the guesswork out of the build. So this quote from Mike Davidson at Twitter it really sums up the importance of a prototype. So often, as a front-end developer, I'll get designs, and sometimes there'll be information in them that I can use, or sometimes once we start actually building it, you find that the original concept doesn't work. There's too much text, or there wasn't really thinking about how this was going to work on a super large screen, or this no longer works in mobile. And so then there's a crazy email exchange back and forth, and then or somebody's angry about this, or I may not actually have time to actually consult with the designer on it because the designer's now working on something else. Having the ability to prototype takes a lot of that guesswork out of the process, so that we're actually testing these theories. Because really, a design comp is at best is a theory of how an interface should look, how it should function. Until it's in the browser, it's unproven. And when we say prototype, I don't want you to think that we have to sort of build an actual website all the time, right? I think that that the budgets and times don't always allow for that. So prototypes can be built using a variety of tools. They can be as simple as a lo-fi sketch or storyboard, or they can be full-scale pages that that you use in some kind of interactive style guide. They can be internal documents that you just share with one another as you're trying to sort of researching potential solutions, or they could be full-scale client deliverables. What you build and how you use them will really depend on the problem that your team is trying to solve and the time that you have available and also the budget. So, Corey, let's talk about some of the ways we prototype here at 401.
Yeah, so if you're a designer, and these days a lot of print designers are sort of making that transition into the web world, and that's true for myself. I think it's easy for us to just sit down and just sketch out ideas, much the way you would approach logo design. Sometimes it's just better to sort of start at the paper level, and for me, sketching is the thing. The goal here is to generate as many ideas as possible, and this is often done between your UX and visual designers sort of pairing up as a collaborative team, but like here, we sort of evolved that process to sort of include developers into that process so they can sort of see early on some of the things that we're thinking of and directions. We're not really focusing at this stage. We're not really focusing on functional details, so it's mostly visual. So like I said, it allows you to generate ideas very quickly. You focus on functional details, not visual. Little setup time. Just grab a pencil. There's no code. It's not really a client deliverable. One thing Sean and I like to do is sort of plan out animation strategies around that on the sketching.
Yeah.
If you had any points.
Yeah. So like the idea of like animation storyboarding. So like oftentimes we'll talk about how when presented on a web page, something should react when the user interacts with it. What is that? So what does that look like? What does that workflow look like? And with sketching, it's just really easy to have ideas, throw them away, make changes really quickly, discuss how the whole process is going to work, because oftentimes there's a lot of assumptions that happen with what you think the user is going to do, but having the ability to sort of walk through a storyboard, with designer, with developer, we have an understanding of what we're trying to build, and we can be on the same page. And again, like you said, it's very minimal setup, but but really the idea that we have these conversations and we're planning for it allows us to be more proactive.
All right, what are some other tools we got out there?
So one of our favorite ones, like when Corey and I are working together, is CodePin. And so a lot of front-end developers will probably recognize this screen. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, CodePin is a web-based interactive platform that allows you to, put HTML, CSS, and JavaScript on a page and actually see that code rendered in real time. And if you're a front-end developer, it's great because you can use things like Sass, you can use CoffeeScript or Babel, and it'll all compile. You can use Markdown, and it allows you to really quickly play around with a lot of things. It's really the ultimate front-end developer's playground. And so often what Corey and I will do is, he'll be thinking about a particular, navigation element, or it's a particular interaction with the form, or how are we going to animate this or this component in or out. And so what we can do is we can really focus on that component level thing. I can present it. We can share these URLs with one another. The other thing that we like to do is actually there's a feature in CodePin where you can live code. And so I will actually be at my terminal coding some things out. We can make slight adjustments on the transition of things and the easing. We can, change a color, or if button's not working, how can we improve how this button's going to work? And that's all done in real time.
Yeah, I don't know about any of you other designers out there, but I love to learn new things, and I feel like CodePin was that sort of bridge for me to sort of understand how code works as it relates to visual output. So you know, we have a lot of fun here with going back and forth, but at the end of the day, it's really boiling your design down to just those elements that are giving you the most trouble and something that you're really trying to focus on. So just break up your design and focus on it at one chunk at a time, and you know, eventually these things we can sort of compile them and put them together, and we'll talk about design systems a little bit later.
Yeah, and sometimes we'll focus on like if in the initial concept, the UX or the design, there's some really difficult component. Like we're not actually sure how this is going to work.
Yeah.
This is a perfect opportunity to sort of play with this idea, see how it's going to work, because what we don't want to happen is, you know, UX design has shown this to the client, and all of a sudden they're in love with it, and now it's the gospel and we have to build it to them.
Yeah, that happens not as often here as it has at some other places I've worked with.
So, you know, this is just one example of a tool that we use. You know, the one thing I will say about it, it's not something that you can necessarily brand as and share as a client deliverable. It's also, there's a cost associated with it, particularly if you want to use some of the more advanced features like live coding and things like that. But you know, all in all, really the sign up is free. You can actually start using it and play with it today. But I think it's definitely worth something that you add into your workflow.
Yeah, totally. One other tool that another tool we're going to talk about here is Webflow. You know, we're just going to touch on it briefly. You know, as design and development teams, we have to be aware of these tools out there, and one that a lot of our designers are actually adopting is Webflow, and it's basically a way to design with HTML and CSS. I find this software, although I haven't used it much, I find it really great to sort of play around with HTML and CSS, learn it in the process as it relates to your specific design. But there are some pros and cons here. So, you know, it is real code. It has a great graphics interface. It's very designer friendly. You have shareable URLs, much like CodePen. But the cons here is that the code is not quite production ready. And it may not include the latest HTML, CSS technologies. And it also still requires the use of a tool such as Photoshop or Sketch to sort of get your design materialized before you actually get into the software to play around with these ideas.
So one of the things I do like about Webflow as a web developer, I think sometimes the concept of what's possible in a browser is not always, you know, a designer may not always be aware. And so, like, oftentimes, I'll get a design that obviously doesn't take into account how markup actually works or CS actually works. Webflow allows a designer, like, with similar tools that, you know, if you were in Photoshop, to be able to see these things and how they actually interact. Because, you know, having a comp and being able to do things that you do in print don't always translate to the web. And we have to, and have, sometimes that dialogue gets lost because I'm trying to explain it and I may be using, you know, some crazy term that you're not really familiar with. But to be able to actually see it and see how it plays out with the code, I think is important.
Yeah, one of our designers, Daniel Farrow, he actually used Webflow to sort of convince a client on a unique navigation style, and he just focused on building that out in Webflow. He kind of consulted with one of our developers, and he built this thing, and he was able to do it a lot quicker than waiting, sort of that whole process of waiting till it gets to the development stage. But it really helped push a lot of our projects on, and I think that a lot of our designers are going to start playing around with it more, because I think it is important for designers to understand how these things work. It's only going to make you a better designer. So suck it up, learn these new tools, and trust me, you'll reap the benefits.
And then just one more note on the sort of production ready. Like the hope is that you can, you know, pull this code down, and a lot of it will depend on your environment. Like here at Forum One, we do mostly Drupal and WordPress builds. So for us, we have a system in place of templates and structure that may not doesn't really account for what Webflow is going to give you. So while it is helpful for a developer, because one, you've actually, you know, seen how the actual design is going to work in the browser, but we still will need to sort of take that code and make it fit within our system. And so that may be a sort of not a minor obstacle, but I think there are more benefits to using this as a tool, particularly for design teams, than not.
Yeah, I agree.
So finally, one of the tools that we use extensively at Forum One is Pattern Lab. And at its core, Pattern Lab is really just a static site generator that pulls together UI components. It's based on the Atom design principles championed by Brad Foss, where you have to think of all interfaces on a web page as small components, atoms that sort of build into larger interfaces or molecules that then build into templates and or pages. And so, like I said, we use this pretty extensively here at Forum One. It's actually part of our themes that we build into our sites so that a client always has a living style guide that's representative of all the different design components that are used to build our site. And some of the advantages of this is like we're actually thinking again about the component level structure of pages. We get to play around to a certain degree with variations on these components and see how those things interact. Some cool parts about Pattern Lab is that you can it's actually responsive. So within the template, you can actually resize the browser and see how these individual components will react responsively, and then when you place these components together, how they work together on a particular page. It has its own navigation system, so clients can actually navigate through the entire style guide and see how the individual components work together. There is a cost to setting it up. It definitely requires some setup, and then obviously there's the hosting portion of it. But if you can make this part of your workflow, I think it's really helpful because it really preaches the idea in practice of building a component or individual component-driven systems for not only for designers but also for developers as well.
Yeah, for me, it's a great reference tool. I mean, we as designers, we often use a style guide as sort of like our guiding Bible to everything that we create for that brand. And this is a good way to go back and check colors and things as you start rolling out new features to see everything sort of in one place. So which leads to the next concept here of design systems, not pages. Often the process of designing a website is you design these page templates, and those templates, you then use those templates for various content pages, but take a step back from the page level and focus on the elements that build those pages, the Pattern Lab sort of, if you will, or Atom principle. So just like building a great brand, great brands sort of thrive under this idea of consistency across every touch point. And I like to look at design systems in that way too. Everything from the button to the colors to the type, and laying out everything all in one place is great, and it adds consistency. So a few points here. Developers think in components and scalable solutions. That's design systems at its core. Developers also like to use reusable patterns. Any time that you can save time, any way you can save time and sort of use these reusable patterns is best. And really, great brands do thrive in systems, and it creates consistency. Creating an effective design system will also allow you to create a future-friendly, scalable solution.
So one of the things, well, I guess before we jump to the next thing, one of the things I really like here at Forum One is, I see this often in our design pen, is when designers have all of the pages on their site up on the wall, because that means that says to me that you're thinking about looking at the entire site globally. You're looking for common patterns where we can sort of make these things into like modular components, and because from a developer standpoint, when I get a PSD, like I'm trying to do exactly that. I'm trying to see where all the commonalities are, so I can build a solution that because I have to think about another developer coming in after me and having to maintain it. So like the more we can reuse patterns, the less we have these sort of very unique situations, the better your site's going to be, because it's not just about sort of building this site for today, but that site has to function as something that can grow and you can build on.
I think we should call that Corey wallpaper.
Yeah, I do that one. If you ever look at my wall, it's covered full of.
No, I definitely appreciate
full of magic.
So, as we're talking about building this sort of dev-friendly system of colors, fonts, and components, I think now is like a perfect time to start talking about how these elements work together, or actually not so much work together, but how they perform together. So the idea that it looks good, but is it fast? So here's a great sort of stat. 85% of mobile users expect similar or better performance compared to their desktops. So if you're a front-end developer or you're a web designer, you obviously know that your phone does not have the same processing power as a desktop computer. It's not on. It's not on. It's not on. Your landline. Your high-speed internet connection. However, like as designers and developers, it's our job to deliver the best possible user experience. And oftentimes that means that we need to deliver faster pages. So the conversation about page performance generally falls to the developers, and it generally happens at the end of a build. But it's not just a dev issue. And so designers and UX professionals have to really, they play an important role in figuring out page performance, and these things have to be addressed early in the process. So I think the best way to think about it is that everything on a web page has a cost. It has a cost in kilobytes, it's got a cost in HTTP requests, or CPU processing power. So the images, the JavaScript, the web fonts, all of those things are going to add weight to your page, thereby affecting performance. So it's up to us to make judicious decisions about how to display the information earlier in the process so that we can improve performance down the road.
So I know you designers love budgets. Here's another one, performance budget.
Right.
I'm sorry, but it's actually a very important thing if you want to create a great experience.
So we think that designers and developers should work together to establish a performance budget. And it's like you said, it's not that different than a budget that you may have for the finances of your house. You're setting up like a milestone or a target. And for example, it may be the total weight of a page will not exceed, let's say, 800, 900 kilobytes, and we're not going to go over 30 HTTP requests, which means like pulling images or requesting JavaScript files or those kind of things. Or you can base it on load time. So this page should load in under 10 seconds on a mobile device using some slow 3G network. So then that makes you think about things. Then you have to ask yourself the tough question. Do you really need that carousel on the homepage?
Or like as I like to say here, is the juice really worth the squeeze? Thank you, Joe DePalma, if you're listening. I got that from one of my old creative directors. But that statement sort of has guided me on every decision making I've done here in web.
Right. So then the question because if you decide that carousel is necessary, which in this particular example is like 900 kilobytes, we're pretty much at budget at this point. How do we modify the design of the rest of the page so that it's still performing? And so I think the important thing when you think about performance budgets is not so much that, all right, cool, we're not going to display something because it's over budget. It's really thinking about how we display the information, because what you show is a UX question. It comes down to the discovery about how you're going to present the information on your page. But we have a responsibility to really think about how we show that information so that we provide the best possible experience for our users.
At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. So let's talk about design ready or developer ready deliverables. It's a mouthful, but creating it really boils down to creating the design files that your designer can then translate very easily. And because at some point that handoff has to come, even though you've worked collaboratively. But Sean's going to sort of break down some ideas on how we can make that easier.
So if you're a front-end developer or any developer, you have been in this experience before. You're getting started on a project. You're like, all right, cool. You're going to build this new site. It's going to be amazing. The designs are ready. Great. You've seen some of them. Awesome. It looks good. You get that PSD. You download it. You open it up, and you look like this woman in this slide. And you're like, what is going on here? It's scary. Everything is everything. You have no clue what's going on because there's layers everywhere. Everything is called button one or image this, and it makes no sense.
It's glorious.
So I think if we're working together, if we're communicating, the idea is that we want to try to make these handoffs, when we do need to hand things off, as seamless as possible. For designers, I think if you want your concept realized, the more you can do to make that process efficient for your developer, allows us to then focus on actually realizing your core concepts and getting cool stuff done on the website versus like trying to, organize a PSD file or figure out what you meant. And I think some of that core stuff comes from, documentation.
Yeah, documentation. It's really it's one of those things I sort of cringed at first, like documentation, like how do you do this? What's the best way? One thing I like to do, and this is not like the most ideal way, but it works for me. I feel like once we have a design concept, we use InVision a lot here. It's a tool, an in-browser tool that allows you to put up your design concepts and get feedback and go back and forth. We're not always going to be in the same room, so sometimes this sort of makes it easier. And you can actually add comments directly to your design. So what I like to do is I like to take a part of my design, add a comment, throw in some details. Hey, I saw this cool trick on this site. Check it out. But you still want to have that face-to-face or sort of maybe it's a Google Hangout, but always sort of connect with your developer and talk through these ideas. It's not enough to just send them a documentation list, because I don't know about you, I don't like when I just get random feedback through an email from a client. It's always best to just have that conversation, whether it's on the phone or in person.
Yeah, the documentation, I think having the conversation is great, but if you can document, because occasionally somebody's in a meeting or somebody's not away, but like if you can refer to something in a file, I think it's always helpful. And I think part of that documentation process is coming up with a common vocabulary. Like, one of the things that we're striving to do here at Forum One is to really think about the sort of core level components that we use on a day-to-day basis, because building a web page, it's not that different. There's articles, there's headers, there's footers, there's navigation elements, but oftentimes we may be talking a different language, but if we can develop a common vocabulary that is present throughout each stage of the process, it makes some of that stuff more efficient. We're all talking the same language. We know what's going on. So, for example, on this slide, you can call it, some people call it an image rotator, some people call it a slider or whatever, or an image widget, whatever you want to call it. Like, for the purpose of this, we're going to call it a carousel. And now that we've established that is a carousel, that can get translated into how the layers are organized. So that when I open up the file, I see basically a component carousel, and in that component carousel there are carousel slide items, and so we're working again with the same knowledge, and then once I get that, I can then start to craft markup that is directly associated with the presentation of these items. And so then when we're giving each other feedback, we're all on the same page and we know what's going on.
Yeah, no, this was great for me to see, and it really helped me sort of understand how our developers think or approach a design. And I didn't realize that what I was creating in Photoshop wasn't actually efficient. I layered my file, I created my layers pretty organized, or at least what I think is organized, but I never thought about this concept of semantic markup and how drawing these sort of relationships back.
And so, and the expectation is not that a designer is going to decide that this carousel contains an article. Like there are obviously things that that a front-end developer has to be responsible for to create semantic markup so that it works in different areas. But I think from a component level, we just need to be on the same page of what we're building and how these things are more or less going to be structured. And then you let the dev figure out sort of the core elements of how that works best in a browser. This is pretty straightforward, but SVG versus PNG. If you can go the SVG route, definitely go the SVG route. Again, this is a performance issue. It's a visual issue. SVGs are crisper. They're scalable vector graphics, so it's all math versus pixels. And so whenever you have the opportunity, use an SVG. From a dev standpoint, if we need to do fallbacks for images, there are tasks. There are JavaScript tasks that allow us to quickly generate the PNGs that we need. But whenever we can, if you can provide the SVG or an Illustrator file, that always works best.
Yeah, one thing that's really helpful is to just have a meeting. When you first sort of engage on a project and you're going to be creating some files for your developer. Just talk to them and ask your developer how they like to receive files. Not a lot of designers do that. Sometimes we just create these things and we think all developers are equal. They all think the same. But my working relationship with Sean is different than some of our other developers, and that's fine. The key to this whole point of this whole webinar is to sort of encourage collaboration. At the end of the day, oh, so let's recap real quick. So some of the things that we talked about, sorry about that, folks who are listening. Let me, before I get ahead of myself, yeah, we love each other here. But anyways, the 6 points that we went over here are...
Or 5, actually, because we haven't gone over 6 yet.
Oh, yeah, you're right. 5 plus 1. So we want to think mobile first. Get your designs into browser early. Design systems, not pages. Design with performance in mind. And create dev-ready deliverables. And to our 6th point,
communicate. Like, I think, throughout this whole process, you should be communicating, but I think there's a difference between just talking, but having, like, sort of effective communication. So, like, from a dev point of view, I think it's important for developers to, if you're not part of the process, particularly that early design process on your teams, is to really advocate to be a part of that. Like, you should be in all those initial meetings. You should, bring up the sort of, like, have we thought about this, or is this going to be an issue? Like, and I think the other thing from a front end standpoint is to, saying no is easy. Like, you can say no to everything, but like but really trying to find another way, or being able to offer other solutions. So occasionally Corey will come to me with something, and it's either going to require a significant time in development, or it's not necessarily possible using the current web tools that we have now. And so instead of just saying, oh, that's not possible, what I want to do is, all right, cool, what are you trying to achieve? How can we do this differently? Like, or maybe have you thought about this versus that? And so
Yeah, no, it actually adds some fun to the process, where we sort of go back and forth, and I have one way of thinking and he has another, but it really adds depth to our design. I think our designers, our developers are concerned with brand goals. So always relay those brand goals to your developer too, because what we're building fits into a much bigger ecosystem. So it's important to remember that. And this idea of progressive enhancement is the key here. Is like design, build, iterate, and sort of share your ideas.
So, like, on that idea of progressive enhancement, I think we all should be selling that, because this idea that the web experience is not going to be the same for every user, because it really depends on how they're browsing, what they're browsing on. And so, oftentimes it's like, all right, we have this design, but while I can make it work in this browser, it may be slightly different in this other browser. It's still going to be a great experience, but we will build to the browser or the unique experience that user is going to have on that particular device. And so where some user supports the CSS grid or Flexbox, let's do Flexbox versus and then it's just going to look slightly different on somebody else's device, but it'll still look great, and it's still a great experience.
So design plus development equals crafting a great experience. So we're just going to wrap up here, and I want to thank everybody for joining us, and we hope you've got something out of this webinar. There's no way we can cover everything there is to learn in this sort of working relationship, but we do plan to host a workshop in DC this coming January. Stay tuned. We're actually going to put out the date soon, and we hope to see some of you in person, where we'll actually get to mix it up and get our hands dirty.
Guys, thank you. That was awesome. I want to leave some time for questions, but I do want to reiterate how awesome the slide with the unicorn is. It's my favorite. Just want everybody to know that. Cool. All right. So, as Corey mentioned, we will be holding a workshop that digs a little bit deeper, takes a couple of hours to talk through how you can put some of these collaboration ideas into practice. This will be the last workshop in our Creative Plus series, so I really hope that you can join us. And now we've been getting some great questions. Actually, what's kind of cool is we have a couple people asking the same questions, so people really want to know.
Get the same answer.
Don't worry, Sean. I'll start out easy.
Thank you.
All right. So 2 people have actually asked this question in different ways. So basically, the same question for each of you. Sean, what is the one thing you wish all designers knew or did to make your job easier? And Corey, same thing, but with feds.
So I think that it would be helpful, particularly if you're going to design a web for any designer, is to take a low level or HTML CSS class, because I think one of the biggest sort of some of the biggest issues around like build to dev or design to dev is that designers are not aware of what's not possible or aware of what's possible, and having that sort of disconnect. And so if you have an idea of like, all right, cool, this is how the web works, these are the sort of the constraints that I'm dealing with. One, I think you end up being a better designer, because designs like with some constraint actually ends up being like really really cool design, because you're getting the problem solving with constraints. So I think that to me is the most helpful.
Yeah, and I think for developers, I want them to sort of understand typography and some of the basic foundation principles that go into making a great design. I tend to think that there's more for us designers to learn. Going from print into this web world. Sean brought up HTML and CSS, so I think that I lean more in his thinking there, that it is important for designers to understand the technical challenges. But if developers sort of understand the overall branding goal we're trying to achieve with the website, I think that that's important, and just keeping an open mind is key.
No, I definitely agree with what you're saying about typography, because if you think about the web is all type.
Yeah.
And so like understanding how typography works and how it translates from like you think about leading and how that translates into line height and sizing and all these other things, like there is that is our natural connection there, and we should be working on the same things then.
Yep.
Cool. So in that same vein, you guys are talking about things that you could do better. Kind of on the opposite side, Sean's question is specifically for you. What things are some common offenders that you see designers do often that you think could be solved fairly easily?
I think the first, particularly since now all we do with our responsive site is not thinking mobile. Like, so often we get designs, and it's because of the way the system is set up around client deliverables and getting signed up. Clients generally, I feel like, don't necessarily care that much about the mobile design. It's not the sexy deliverable. So everybody, you get the really big splashy desktop view, and everybody loves it, but it's not built or thought. No one's thinking about how that's actually going to fit in a mobile environment. So I think that's my biggest pet peeve, is that not enough thought is given to how things will work responsibly.
And so I work with you guys a lot, so there are certainly things that I've noticed as well. So what about some things around navigation and interactions or particular designs that just are not possible that people do on a regular basis other than kind of mobile? I find navigation to be a serious offender.
No, navigation, like,
Yeah.
or navigation, or like text sizing is sometimes an issue, like, or just contrast is an issue, because like I'm like a lot of our front end developers responsible for the accessibility, which we're not solely responsible for it. We all have a part to play in that, but a lot of designs now don't take into account contrast, like something as simple as contrast. Or most designers all work on fabulous monitors, like really, like, at home when I'm developing, I have a crappy monitor, I have a decent monitor, and I have like my laptop. And so like I think we should be reviewing designs on crappy monitors, because some users will have crappy monitors, and understanding how like something as simple as contrast can just improve a user's experience.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about the relationship between a front end and a visual designer, but there's another very, very important layer here, and that's the UX design team we have here. And if you're not privileged to have a team, everything that we do is centered around a user experience, and figuring out sort of tough navigational challenges really involves going back down to your user level and sort of keeping an open mind on how these things are built. There's things out there as the hamburger menus and ultra simple navs, but it really comes down to is that the type of navigation that your users want, or is that something that they're going to have an open mind with? So just keep your users in mind.
I like that. So here's a question, and it's a situation that I know both of you have been in, so it might be hard. Sorry, challenging. So do you guys have any suggestions if the designer and the developer are working at different firms? So say if you get designs from another firm, from a person you haven't been collaborating with, or vice versa.
It depends. Like, do you have a relationship with that design firm, or is it just they just gave you these files and you have to deal with it? Because if that's the case, then you just kind of deal with it, like, and you try to make, like, at that point, you're basically just printing out everything and just trying to figure out a way forward. Like, there's not much else you can do, because if you've received designs from somebody else, they've obviously already been signed off on. So, like, you just have to try to build and then make suggestions where you can. I think if certain things don't work, I think it's important to say that early.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'll approach it from, like, my background, where I used to have to create the designs and hand it off to a web firm. Make the first move. Call seriously.
Right?
No, really, call them up and be proactive and walk them through your designs and take an extra step to sort of document things that you're thinking and approaches and sort of walk them through what you were imagining versus some things that you've seen. Back it up with some things you've seen, and make the first move. Communicate as early and often as possible.
Yeah, I think the key is some type of communication or some type of check-in. Like, I prefer if I'm working on a project and the designer checks in with me, and I'll try to check in with him or her as well. But, like, it's hard if the designer is absent, and then at the end when it's already built, it's like, this header is, like, 5 pixels off or whatever. And so it's like, like, I was doing this I wanted to share this with you before, so, like, we could have dealt with this. But I think some type of continued communication throughout the process is helpful.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. So this is a little bit more of a management question. You guys talked about quite a few tools.
Yeah.
So how do you keep track of all of the final decisions that are made in comments or otherwise, and be able to push forward on those once they're documented?
So I think now we use more Jira. So I think, or we'll have, if you're familiar with it, we use Confluence in Jira, which is basically like we'll do like a decision log. Yeah. And so we'll pose questions in that decision log, and, the stakeholders will respond to those questions. And if I have a CodePin sample that I need them to review, I'll paste that link in there. And then, if they've agreed to it, then we just write notes on that. We build from that. And so we group collections of different code pins based on what we've done in the past, so that we can use them for future projects.
Yeah, and it's particularly we work a lot in agile development, and so that requires ongoing sort of meetings and check-ins, sprint reviews, grooming sessions to sort of really work on these designs in an iterative way.
And then we use Pattern Lab a lot, and so basically, a lot of times in a project, we'll sort of implement the design in code and browser, and the client will sign off on that pattern, and then it actually gets built in Drupal or WordPress.
Yep. So if we didn't have those ways of making decisions, what would you guys suggest would be the best way to do that, to make sure that the things that you're actually implementing are the final decision?
Well, I hate to go back to getting email sign off, but maybe it's project management tools out there.
Basecamp. So I think you need or Trello. I think it's helpful to have some type of documentation where you're tracking these things that need to happen, that you've agreed to.
Yeah, it's going to become very problematic to use something like an email for approvals.
Right, then you lost the email, or it's in some kind of weird chain.
Because web is complex. There's a lot of moving parts, and so if you're not already adopting a lot of these tools, I think you totally should, and they'll also help you improve your process and become more efficient teams.
So also on the kind of project management communication side, when you guys, you have a client who asks for a specific design or a specific interaction, how do you communicate with your clients about the limitations of web design?
We sort of come back as a collaborative team and sort of think about these things from the user standpoint, and we often use user experience is our way to sort of back up our claims, and and the key to user experience is having real data, real information about your users. So that often helps push a lot of things. I don't know from
or prototyping. This is where
yeah.
prototyping is a key portion of it, because like sometimes we'll be in a situation where we know that this is probably going to be problematic and not going to work, but the client can't can't see it.
I just want to see it.
Right, or they can't. It's like when somebody buys a house and they don't want to buy the house because the walls are pink. It's like, but you can paint the walls. And it's like
really,
some people can't visualize it. So what we have to do sometimes is actually get something. It doesn't have to be completely finished or complete. It's a raw prototype to show why this situation might be problematic on, say, a browser, or you didn't think about this, or so that they can actually visualize the issue that we have. And I think that's been really helpful in sort of convincing clients that, all right, maybe we should go about this a different route.
Oh yeah.
So we have a listener on the line who says she is more of a designer than a developer, and she wanted to know kind of your personal opinions about new technologies or newest technologies like Squarespace that don't require you to have any development background at all, but that you can go in and actually just design something. From both a design and a development standpoint, what are your kind of ideas about how those are implemented?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say real quick, I think those tools are great for building out portfolios and stuff like that on a personal site sort of basis. But for a big build, I don't think that they can handle the complexities that I often see.
Yeah, well, no, I think you're right. I think it's a great place to sort of because they do a good job. Like, there's some really good design work that's done on Squarespace, and if you look at if you're like sort of nerdy and you want to look at the inspector on your browser, you can actually see how some of these things are built and look at how they are coded, and it is an interesting exercise to do. But our situation is that we fall into things where we're building a lot of custom stuff and a lot of third-party interactions, and so doing that in a Squarespace is a lot more difficult because you don't have as much control over your code and the interactions with like say another API. So, but like for personal work and if you're doing some local level stuff, I think it's a great place to start and really learn about how web things are built.
Yeah, and we understand that there's clients out there with smaller budgets, but really you have to think about a website really is an investment, and how much of your business is generated through a website is an important thing to help you make a decision on which platform. And also thinking about how your website is going to scale over time, and that'll also help you make decisions for the designer listening who may be designing for a smaller business. That there's a lot of things like that you need to consider.
Great. Well, we're closing in on the end of our time here, and I think we're out of questions. Do you guys have anything else, closing thoughts that you would like to add before we adjourn?
No, we actually really love each other.
Oh,
yeah, we do like each other. Yeah.
It's true. I can vouch for this information.
The bromance continues.
It continues.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for attending. Please feel free to follow us at any of our social properties. Also, we will be having the recording for this up on our website in the next week or so. So if you are looking to share this with somebody, please absolutely do. We would love that. And we will be reaching out to everybody who registered for this webinar to let you know when we have our workshop scheduled. But again, thank you so much for your time, and we really appreciate you showing up today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.